Big fan.
Welcome to the Buck Stops here, the official audio program of Notinhalloffame.com, and I'm your host, Kirk Buchner, the Buck, the owner and the operator of Notinhalloffame.com, and of course the sister sites, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame and the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you haven't checked them out, check them out now. Cast your votes for the semifinalists. It's Season 1, Episode 32 of the Hall of Fame show, and Evan Nolan and I, we've got so much to talk about today. The Hockey Hall of Fame made an interesting announcement. They're postponing their class, or their induction of the 2020 class, but they may not have a 2021 class. Like, what? That can't happen. Especially considering that we've just put together the 2021 list for those to consider. A little bit of a spoiler alert, it's heavily Swedish. We also looked at the Philadelphia Phillies and Dick Allen, because they're going to be retiring his number. Will this help Mr. Allen get into the Baseball Hall of Fame? That could very well be. The Veterans Committee will be looking at him in his era relatively soon. We also take a look at the Country Music Hall of Fame. Hank Williams Jr. is now inducted into that, and it's a really good Hall of Fame. Check it out if you haven't already. And we look at a few passings, including one that's a bit near to my heart, that of former pro wrestler Kamala, the Ugandan headhunter. Stay tuned, and without further ado, here's Evan. Mr. Nolan, how goes the world in the lovely city of Chicago?
It's not so bad here. How about you?
Pretty good. It's always warm, always sunny. Life's good in the tropics. I have no problem living in Barbados. How much longer that's going to be, I have no idea, but I'm enjoying it while it lasts.
And it also helps that there's hockey on 24 hours a day, apparently. So.
Yes, it does. I've never been able to watch this much sports in my life. It almost feels like that 3-month window where we couldn't do anything. It's kind of like this big orgasm that's just sort of exploded onto the scene. Sorry for the sad visual, but I do love watching sports.
Wow. That's, yeah, I'm not even going to think about that visual any longer. So what are we talking
Nor
about?
Nor should you. It's one of those things where it's like, screw it. I'm just going to finish the thought. What do I care? I've said much worse on this show.
I know. I think the boss is going to come down on you. So
it's altogether possible. Altogether possible. So I thought the one thing that sort of really concerned me, but no one really seemed to be picking up on, the Hockey Hall of Fame, they're postponing everything to 2021, like everyone else is, for their class of 2020. But Lanny McDonald, in a statement, just said, "Yeah, we may not even have a class of 2021." Like, what? And I posted, like, "Am I reading this right?"
You were reading it right. That is what he said.
I can't.
That doesn't seem like a good plan.
No. I mean, like, the only thing I can think of is they're trying to be somewhat proactive, thinking that the whole season might sort of be in jeopardy again. COVID's not going away anytime soon. We're not really sure how the season's going to progress. I can't imagine they want to continue this whole bubble idea. It's a lot of revenue they're losing out on. But,
yeah,
nevertheless, the Hockey Hall of Fame ceremony doesn't generate a whole lot of revenue anyway.
No, and I mean, and there's some interesting candidates. I know we'll get into that in a little bit with your list, but yeah, it's maybe this is the year. Say that they're not having a class, and then they could quietly induct Don Cherry.
It very well could.
Don Cherry and Jerry Ronick is your class.
And how perfect are they ranked back to back? It was not planned.
I know. The list is wonderful because 4, 5. Sorry, I guess it's 5, 6, 7, and 8 is like your pet project, Don Cherry, Jeremy Roenick, and my pet project. It's my favorite part of the list.
It's incredible. So I really hope that the Hockey Hall does this. Again, there's not. I understand why you don't want to do things virtually. I get it. I agree. I agree at the same time, but you don't want to miss out on a whole year and then push some people who are really waiting. And
right.
Clearly, by your 2020 class, Kevin Lowe had to wait quite a bit. Doug Wilson
waited a long time.
Yeah, I'm more partial to Doug Wilson, who I think is the far better candidate. But still,
agreed.
Still, I mean, like when you're making these guys wait longer, like there's not. It's not like you're going to have a glut of players in. It's not going to go the route of the Pro Football Hall of Fame that's going to say, you know what, like we've missed out on a whole whack of people. The Hockey Hall has been around since the 40s. There's not a lot of original six guys left that really deserve another look. Maybe one, maybe two, but realistically, there's not.
Right. Yeah, and that's pretty much all covered. So we're going to have stuff that it's more 70s and closer for players. So there are still good candidates out there. I mean, are we going to go through your list now, or do you want to come back to it?
Yeah, we can go through that now. I mean, unless there's something else that you want to sort of look at in regards to Lanny's announcement.
Not really. I mean, I did think it's interesting, though, was it the Baseball Hall, even though they haven't had the class yet, opened up the exhibit for all the people who are going to be inducted, even though they're not officially in yet. I don't know if you saw that.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think that probably makes some sense. I mean, oh, shoot. Sorry, I'm watching the Bruins just give up a goal to Carolina by not working very hard. Yeah, I mean, I think that has, for a Hall of Fame like Cooperstown, you need the people coming in. You need people to have a reason coming in, even if they don't have the speeches, having them in memorabilia and everything about the guys who would be in and with everything makes some sense. I mean, that's more the route that the Hockey Hall should go than anything else, but who knows? I mean, hockey, not the Hall necessarily, but hockey in general tends to make some strange decisions on things.
Well, they very much do. They very much do. It's a large sport. It's a great hall. I recommend anyone who's visiting Toronto, like, go there. It's a lot of fun. They try to make it very interactive. It's a fun way to sort of spend an hour. I'm clearly a minute and a half behind you because I just saw that goal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
Chicago's closer to Toronto than the tropics are. So I guess that's what's going on there. Sorry about that.
No, it's kind of funny because when you said like, just watch them give up a goal, it's like, what? They're just all talking to the refs right now. What the hell?
Yeah. Well, you were like, oh, they're not working very hard. That's probably a goal coming. Yeah, they just stopped skating for a shift, and Carolina just scored. That happens.
And the hockey fans will go wild in Charlotte, but actually, you know what? They've supported their team well, so I shouldn't say.
Yeah. No, no. But the Whalers still should come back. Just not at the expense of the Hurricanes.
No.
No, I do have to say something happened last night, though. Sorry, I know it's off topic, but to say about watching hockey. Something happened I never expected ever to happen. I found myself rooting for the Vancouver Canucks.
You hate the Blues?
Oh, my God. That team, David Perron is probably my least favorite player in the league right now.
Really?
I dislike everything about him.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's going to sound like sour grapes being a Bruins fan and everything, but that team just gets away with so much dirty stuff over and over and over again. And so watching them lose would make me not win the Stanley Cup. If the Bruins don't win the Stanley Cup, as long as the Blues don't win, I think I'm okay. Well, or the Canadiens.
It's how I feel when the Leafs are out. It makes me very happy. As a Bruins fan, I have to give credit. That save by Carey Price the other day was one of the greatest saves I've ever seen in my entire life. It was amazing. Absolutely.
I mean, I had no idea how, A, he saved it, and B, how he prevented his teammate from having a whole new set of dentures, because that's what was coming his way. That was incredible. So, anyway, yeah. So let's go to the list.
Yeah, so it's completely revised. So before I sort of do a countdown, it's the list itself. It's the core list. It's actually the second list that ever came up on Notinhalloffame Hall of Fame. The first one being the Rock list, and it ranks those who were not yet in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I've expanded it to 300, and there's a caveat in the article I wrote. Do I think that 300 players should be in there? No, not even close. No one does. Lists are fun. I enjoy putting them together. Most people love debating it, and I will say that the last 25 of any of this top 300 providing there is a goalie, which I don't remember if there's a goalie in there or not, could win a Stanley Cup. So we're talking about some really good players. So if you're listening, vote, because your votes matter. These rankings change. I'll set up where I think they should start, but they move up and down based on what all of you were telling us.
All right, let's see. I'm checking right now if there is a goalie. The late Steve Chiasson, Chris Dury, Brad Stewart, Ilya Bryzgalov, right?
Yep, there we go.
There we go. We got a goalie.
All right, so then I've got a Stanley Cup contender right there.
Oh, and we also have some fun and J.S. Jaguar's on there. I'd take Jiggy as my goalie. And you also got some fun former Bruins: Barry Peterson, Dave Christian, Sergei Samsonov. Nice. Former Bruins coach, not so very good, Robbie Ftorek.
Mostly there for his WHA.
These are some pretty good players. I'm not going to lie. These are... Sheldon Saray was a pretty good player. Brendan Morrow, Russ Courtnall. Those are some pretty good guys.
Yeah, and
at the bottom of this list.
And I think also, too, if people are listening and they're sort of looking at this and think, well, my God, there's a lot of Europeans on this. Remember, the Hockey Hall of Fame counts what you do internationally. So that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be some players, maybe a German down the road. I don't know. Uwe Krupp? No, probably not Uwe Krupp. But
Ole the goalie?
Ole the goalie. I mean, that plays a lot into how you can get in. Although, you know where I think I told you this before, the IIHF Hall is actually right in the same building as the Hockey Hall of Fame, and it's just pretty much one wall.
Okay.
So it's not quite the same thing, but obviously. But it's still pretty cool. So there you go. You knock off 2 halls in one visit.
There you go. You know what you should do?
What's that?
But when you're allowed back in, where we're allowed to go back and do stuff, you should just travel around from hall to hall and just report on it.
I plan to. You're supposed to come with.
Oh, okay. I'll do that.
You know, like after you're making your millions doing what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. My millions. So I will say, can I go off topic just again for 1 second? I know we haven't talked about all this stuff, but I had a situation in work, which I know we don't normally bring up, but I'm just going to say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't have a will, just get it together. Because I have a set of clients who are in their early 70s who went to go visit some family friends in Indiana, only to and someone who they went to visit, or they went to visit family. I'm sorry, in Indiana, and someone there had COVID. One of the younger people. And they didn't realize it. And both of them caught it, and they're both intubated right now and probably going to die over the weekend. And they don't have a will, and everything is a mess. So please, everybody who's listening, if you don't have end-of-life planning documents, just get them done, because this is an absolute, utter disaster, what's about to happen if they don't pull through. And the husband has kidney issues now, and the wife has got brain swelling and all sorts of stuff, so I don't think they're going to make it. But let's if you don't have them, just get them. It's so much easier for everybody else, even though it's a weird conversation to have. Off my soapbox.
Well, those awkward conversations are the ones sometimes that are the most important.
I have a lot of them, and not just on this podcast.
Well, usually it's because I make them awkward in a different way.
Yeah, well, true. But I mean, I could tell you, right now I'm drinking a New Glarus Totally Naked. But that's just the name of the beer. And New Glarus is the name of the company. So that would be awkward. But you're already talking about orgasming, so me being totally naked is probably not quite as bad.
Well, I meant that in a metaphoric way. I didn't mean that in a literal.
Literal, metaphoric. Is there any difference these days?
I would think so. I think there's a pretty damn big difference. Was it David Cross who does that bit? About like how bad sportscasters are. He literally took his head off in that play. Well, no.
Yeah.
His head's still attached.
Yeah. Anyway, so on your list, where do you want to start?
Right from the top.
Oh, so we're counting down that way? Okay.
Yeah, just do the top 10. So the new top 10.
Okay.
Which has got 2 new people. So number 1, number 2, Henrik Sedin, Daniel Sedin. The Canucks twins. The Canucks appear on this podcast twice. And really, they're it's like 1A, 1B. Henrik gets the slight nod only because he's got the heart. Sedin does have the Ted Lindsay Award, which is essentially the player's version of the Hart Trophy.
Right.
And they're both going to get in first ballot, no doubt.
Yeah, well, they do everything together, so it'd be weird if they didn't. Honestly, in sports history, that's one of the weirdest things, though, that one team ended up with the first 2 picks so they could draft a set of twins. Like, that's unprecedented and weird, isn't it?
I can't think of another example. Like, not one.
Yeah, good on the Canucks for the marketing and actually getting good players at the same time. Yeah. But yeah, no, there's no question in my mind that one and 2 being Sedin twins is the correct top 2 out of your list. So, and they're in first time eligibles. They should both be in, presuming there's a class.
Right, and you and I said this, that they're pretty much going to take 2 of those 4 spots. So now it's just really a grab to get those last 2. So who would it be? Could it be number 3, Alexander McGillney? Maybe.
It could, and I mean, I honestly think it's your number 5, but we'll get there in a second.
See, I don't.
But we thought it was your number 5 last time too.
See, I don't. I think he's hurt by this. But number 4, who I think could get in, I'll make a little bold prediction. I think that's going to be his year, is Terran Fleury.
Okay.
Because Fleury would have been in already if he didn't sort of snort himself out of greatness and cheat himself out of a year or 2 of like really good play. Yeah. But this is still a great player. Yeah, and his story is resonating
more and more.
Well, more and more every year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Fleury is another good top choice. Like, I might quibble a little bit on where the lists are. I actually wouldn't have Fleury 4th on this list, but I wouldn't have him like 12th either. You know what I mean? So if he's a couple spots away, I'm not going to be freaking out.
A lot of that too, though, is the votes that come in.
Well, that's true. I know. I understand. I know this is your list in that it is hosted on your site,
right?
But it is not overall your list, other than putting new people in where that you think they slot and belong, like Sedin twins. We know if it's had a chance to vote on yet. Right,
and then everything else just sort of like slides, and sometimes you just see some massive drops and massive gains, based on like maybe I evaluated this wrong, or maybe it's one of those cases where the fans are just really high on one player and like, yeah, I know he was popular, but was he really that good? But you still got to take that into consideration. Popular players put asses in seats.
That is true. All right, so number 5?
My big guy, my main guy, and a bit of personal bias, disclosure, I'm an Ottawa Senators fan, Daniel Alfredson, number 5, does not get a lot of love from a lot of the voters, hence why he's probably below actually 2 people who I would have put him up personally, and he was at one point, now he's not. So that makes 3 of 5 Swedish players on the top 5, which could hurt him. Because do we want a Swedish smorgasbord?
I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that would be the reason why I'd get hurt by it.
I mean, it could. I mean, they shouldn't think along those lines, but maybe they will.
Yeah, the North Americanism of hockey intelligentsia has always been weird to me. And particularly in Canada, they always talk about European captains and things along those lines that just don't seem to matter, really. But apparently it has locker room chemistry stuff. I don't know. I don't quite understand why. But yeah, no, I guess that might hurt him. But I think you and I both agree that we're surprised he's still on the board at this point, because he seems to be most pundits' number 1 guy who should be in and isn't. And pretty much every year they have a list.
And every year on Twitter, he's the biggest snub. Because I always look to see who's sort of trending, like what names sort of coming up. But like, what are people saying should have got in? And it's always Alfredson the last few years. But it's sort of funny you bring up everything you just said, because that's the perfect segue to number 6.
Oh, Yes. Well, I am the king of segues to Don Cherry.
Because I don't. Did you like? I know you're familiar with Cherry, of course, but how much did Americans sort of see Don Cherry other than his coaching in Boston? Like, did you see him like?
I mean, we saw his crazy outfits a lot. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I mean, I was familiar with Don Cherry not from coaching in Boston because he coached before I was really cognizant of it, or at least who the coach was. But the first coach I remember for the Bruins was Harry Sinton, who was also the general manager. I was familiar with him. We saw him. He was like he would come on SportsCenter and seemed to us like the crazy jacketed Canadian version of Barry Melrose on NHL Tonight.
Okay.
And he said some outrageous things, but they have gotten more and more outrageous as we've gone.
Yeah, and also the bar has changed for what's considered outrageous in certain things that he would say.
That is also true.
Yeah. So Cherry, number 6, just to sort of like put the non-Canadians like or where we all know him from. Cherry was the host of a segment on Hockey Night in Canada called Coach's Corner. Or not the host, he was actually the subject, really, because it would be Ron McLean and Don Cherry. And before that, I can't even remember the talking head who was next to him before, who quit that job thinking he was going to become a bigger star. And it didn't work out so well that I can't remember that name. I remember his haircut. I can't remember the guy who sat next to him, but it doesn't matter.
Jimmy the Greek. It was Jimmy the Greek. We'll just go with that.
Might have been. We have a lot more Ukrainians, so let's just say Jimmy the Uke.
Okay, sure. Continue.
So, and the segment was never more than 2 minutes. That's all it was. And it'd be Cherry just be doing the same thing that he always does. Loves the tough guys. Always ragged on the Europeans because the Europeans, when they were first coming into the NHL, and he was right on this, were generally, quote, soft, end quote. No, they weren't fighters. They weren't necessarily adapting. And it took a long time before – I mean, there used to be this talk for years in Canada how an NHL team was not going to win if they had too many Europeans or a European captain until the Red Wings sort of proved all that wrong.
Yeah, that used to be the rule with whichever team had the fewer Cubs in the World Series, so fewer former Cubs.
Something like that. But yeah, it's there was that prevailing opinion led by Cherry and led by a lot of people, and that for a long time there was data backing that up. And I think certain things have changed. Obviously, a lot of the Europeans have adapted to the NHL style of what that is, and I think winning the Stanley Cup means something now more to a young Swedish player than it did 40 years ago.
True.
So, there's kids growing up in, I don't know, Helsinki who probably think, I want to hoist that cup because I saw Team Usolani do it. So it's almost the perfect thing. Cherry, I can't even express how iconic it was. I know I've said how he was voted the top Canadian at one point in our country. No, he was not. Sorry, in the top 10.
Okay.
There was a CBC.
I was going to say, if he was number 1, the Canadians would actually finally have something to apologize for. You do it anyway, but most of the time you don't need to. That one you might, in retrospect, need to apologize for. So
we've unveiled a lot of crappy music on you that we do need to apologize for.
That's fine. Continue.
Nickelback. I'm looking at you. So CBC put out actually a made-for-television miniseries about this guy.
Okay.
That did good ratings. Actually, going back to ratings, because CBC, like Hockey Night in Canada, would be run in 2 languages, of course, English and French. So it was sort of shown that when all the people in Quebec, they would turn over to the English language broadcast just for Coach's Corner, just to see what's Cherry going to do. So I can't emphasize how big a name he was in Canada. So a lot of people younger than 30 or 20 or the teens, they don't understand what he meant at one point. But then the shtick gets old. And that's essentially what happened. I mean, it's one thing when you're ragging on Swedish players and Finnish players, but you keep doing it when the very thing you're ragging about them no longer exists.
Right.
And so he'd keep a bit of that up, and he just never really knew that line. And he's in his late 80s, probably didn't give a shit. He was probably amazed he was still employed.
Right.
And and he's dropped on this list from 4 to 6. He's kind of grandfathered in as the only coach I've got on this. I'm really considering plucking him out and then putting a contributor builder list. Because he feels like one of these things is not like the other. He always did, but initially I felt so strong because of what he meant at one point to the Canadian psyche. And Canada is hockey. America is baseball. There is just certain sporting realities. And either way, it doesn't seem to fit anymore. So, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. If he's the only one, I mean, he's certainly not on here as a player.
No.
And having contributors list for hockey, and really for any of the sports if you want to do it, makes some sense. Particularly, well, I think more than anything, contributor one should be going for the NFL based off of what they're doing with the number of extra people coming in.
Right.
But no, I agree. I also like the fact that on the website, the picture you have of him makes him look like he's a suspect on To Catch a Predator. It's kind of funny. He's like all deep in shadow and looking evil. So I'm a big fan of that as well.
I'm just trying to picture that. You're not a Swede, are you?
Anyway, all right. Do you want to move to number 7?
Yeah, from one miscreant to another, Jeremy Roenick, the highest-rated American, who has also acted his way out of a potential Hall of Fame.
Yeah, at this point.
It's a shame. I love the guy. Loved watching him play.
Pride of Medford, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that he should have lost his job over what happened. I'm even more sure he shouldn't be suing based on straight bias? Straight prejudice?
Bias against straight people.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yep.
But
but Roenick was a very good hockey player, very much a motor mouth, and the motor mouth probably has hurt him up to this point. But we're getting to the point where Roenick, as a player, should already be in.
Yeah, and if he wasn't in before, now it's going to have to wait a while for this to sort of die down a bit, or doesn't look like it's going to because he seems to be going into Aubrey Huff territory.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, that man was voted worst teammate a couple years in a row, Aubrey Huff, and it's a good reason. I still wonder, because I used to love having Aubrey Huff on my team in Major League The Show, because every time he came up, if you particularly if you're in Tampa, where they didn't have many fans, they didn't have much fan noise when you played Tampa. And someone would heckle from the audience, "Who the hell names a kid Aubrey?" Or "Who names a kid Aubrey?" And I was like, that's kind of mean. And I was like, oh, maybe just nobody liked him. And so they just decided, if we're going to be mean to somebody, let's be mean to Aubrey Huff. So.
I had no idea they did that. That is so awesome.
It was funny. It was very, very funny. And it lasted for from MLB The Show 07 through 10 or 11. So.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Clearly Huff just pissed somebody off, or they just thought this was the funniest thing ever, and they could get away with it, and why not?
Yeah. I mean, what's going to happen? Aubrey Huff's going to be mad at you? Well, he's mad at everybody all the time, so.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, Roenick, I don't know. I mean, I do. He's definitely a Hockey Hall of Famer. I know that this is going to keep him out. It shouldn't. But if any Hall of Fame seems to be the most woke, if that's sort of something they were looking at, I'd say it's the Hockey Hall.
Yeah. Sorry, my phone just beeped at me. Sorry, try again.
Yeah, so that's going forward. I think he's going to have to wait a few years now, no matter what.
No, there's no way they're letting him in right now.
No. Much like how I feel about number 8, Pierre Turgeon.
Yeah.
He's not getting in anytime soon, although we should.
Yeah. He's we've already had this debate on previous episodes of this show, but I will say that I don't care about how you did on the Olympic teams for your country.
Well,
and I know, but it matters, particularly with the Hockey Hall. So if you take that out, he, in my opinion, is the most glaring omission of anybody. But I understand, after having talked to you about this over the last, 3 years we've been discussing this, why he is not in, and that reason is not going away.
Right, and it wasn't the Olympics.
Okay.
It was the World Junior Championship. And can I tell that story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So basically what it was, Pierre Turgeon, 1,327 points. That sounds like a Hall of Famer, right? And I think ever since I've been doing this site, probably, I could be mistaken here, but I would think that he's probably had the most points of anyone who's not in the Hall of Fame almost every year. And with reduced scoring, that's going to probably be the case. I don't want to say forever because that's a long time, but for a long time. Turgeon was a member, and I forget what year, and it really doesn't matter, of the World Junior Championship. And I know you and I have talked about what a big deal that is in Canada. And so it was Canada versus Russia. I can't even remember who won this. I think Russia, but there was a big brawl, bench clearing from both sides. Turgeon never came out. He stayed in the bench, didn't come out, and was ridiculed for that. And he was never, ever on a national team again. Not Olympics, not Canada Cup, not World Hockey Championship. Never. He wasn't welcome.
Okay. Get over it. Pierre Turgeon has been retired since 2007. That was 13 years ago. He played for 20 years. We're now 37 years back. The World Juniors for him probably was a couple years for that. We're talking him not getting up for a fight 40 years ago is keeping him out of the Hall of Fame. Canada, get over yourself.
That's where we fight.
Silly. The only person who has more points than them who's not in the Hall of Fame, who are the only two. They are Jaromir Jagr, who's not eligible, and Joe Thornton, who's still playing, at least for now. Everybody else who has more points than him is in, and the next person who's eligible behind him who's not in is Jeremy Roenick, who's got over 100 points fewer than he does.
Even Wayne Gretzky got into an NHL fight. I'll leave it at that. Actually, Google that at one point. YouTube, Wayne Gretzky versus Neil Broughton. Gretzky's the one who picks the fight. And Broughton's just looking at him like, are you serious? Like, really? Is this really happening? Like, okay. But yeah. Let's move on.
All right, so let's move on to our second American on the list.
John LeClair.
The prime of Vermont.
Love this guy. Multi-time first-team All-Star. Stanley Cup champion with the Habs. But that wasn't even the highlight of that. He became a much better player later with the Flyers. Great player. The first-team All-Stars seem better than he was. Just there wasn't that many great left wingers at the time. But he still did it. He was still the best at his position, recognized 3 times. That means a lot.
Yeah, he was the king of getting in front of the goalie and knocking in the rebound. Like, there's maybe nobody ever who's been better at that than John LeClair. Just being a huge body that the goalie has to deal with, taking up space, and then, once the save is made, just powering through everybody and knocking it in. And that's not meant to be any sort of slight on him. That is tough, hard work to do, and it's hard to remember anyone who's any better at that than John LeClair.
He could get, if they're sort of looking at nationalities, and I kind of think they do when they're putting this all together at the Hockey Hall in the committee room, LeClair, Roenick's antics help LeClair.
I would say that's true.
It shouldn't. It should have nothing to do with it, but I bet it does.
Yeah. I mean, they're still upset about not getting up for a hockey fight 40 years ago. So, yes. I mean, Leclerc's biggest problem is his points total, honestly, because he only has 819.
Right.
So he's tied with Stephane Richer, and he's behind like a whole bunch of people who aren't in, like Billy Guerin, for example, or Trevor Linden, or my cousin who I will claim, Owen Nolan, like even Neil Broughton, who we just brought up. Like none of all those guys are way ahead of him, and he's down at 819. He's 500 points behind Turgeon, who played at very much the same time he did. So I think that hurts a little bit more than, that probably hurts more than we're bringing up. But yeah, he was a very, very good hockey player. I mean, Jason Arnott, he's got like 100 points more than 100 points from he does. And where's Jason Arnott on your list? Somewhere in there.
He's on it. I can't remember where, but I know he's on it.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's out there banging the table for Jason Arnott.
No.
So.
No, and they're not for the number 10 guy, Bernie Nichols.
No, that's another guy. He's third on the list of guys who's eligible without being in for points. Because Bernie Nichols was the guy leading the charge before Roenick and Turgeon retired. Mm-hmm. Well, Turgeon first, then Roenick, because those guys are both ahead of him. But Bernie Nichols is 47th all-time in points, right 1 point behind Bobby Clark. But, yeah, and he's... I mean, where's his constituency, really?
Well, there really isn't any, and not online, not even from himself, from what I could tell. I think a lot of people just look at him as a beneficiary of circumstance because he played with a lot of great players, mm-hmm. but he still produced. If you produce over, and like you said, like with 1,327 points, Nichols is 1,200 and something. You're obviously decent, more than decent. If you can do it at that level, you're not a fluke.
Yeah, he had 1,209 points.
1,209, okay. So, like, obviously a really good player, but I don't think his name even gets brought up.
Yeah, it'd be hard to see. It's hard for me to see that he's getting in anytime soon, even though if you're just going by points totals, he's someone who they should seriously be considering every single year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are a few other additions who weren't in the top 10 that I want to touch on really quick. Another Swede. Sorry, Don Cherry. Henrik Zetterberg, number 29. Another great player. Red Wings fans can tell you just how phenomenal he was. Right behind him would be the first Columbus Blue Jacket who might sort of get a look. I don't know whether he's going to get in or not. I'd say probably not, in Rick Nash.
Yeah, for a former Boston Bruin player for his last 3 months of his career.
Oh, that's true, yes. Yes.
Yep.
And Patrick Sharp at number 75, mostly on the strength of his playoff ability.
And his haircut on the NHL shows.
Have you seen Elliot Friedman's beard?
I have not somehow seen Elliot Friedman's beard during this whole thing.
Okay, maybe that's on some of the Canadian telecasts. Even though I'm in Barbados, I've sort of like going back and forth between American and Canadian, depending on what signal sort of comes in better. But just Google Elliot Friedman's beard. That's your second bit of homework, which is a lot easier than the movies I've been telling you to watch.
Fair enough. No, I just always think Patrick Sharp, when he's on TV, is far too attractive if I've ever been a hockey player. So,
well, come on, you watched Youngblood, and that guy fought too.
That is true. And Mike, other ones who I think, do you have Brian Johnson on the list somewhere?
Brian Johnson, somewhere, yeah, buried, but yes, he's on it.
Yeah. And Scotty Hartnell?
Yeah, Scott. Actually, yeah, he debuts at 106.
Okay. And the last one, Mr. Carrie Underwood himself, Mike Fisher.
He's on it too.
Yeah. Those are the guys who I was like, they're at least good players. I don't know. I mean, the Sedins and Zetterberg are probably the top, and then Nash will step below them. So,
actually, I got sort of like a whole Youngblood thing here too. Did you hear Rob Lowe on Joe Rogan's podcast?
No,
Okay.
I don't listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. So
Okay. So there was a clip online that I listened to. So from that movie, Rob Lowe said that he had no idea until years later that Keanu Reeves, who played the goalie, was actually an actor. He just thought it was some French hockey player, because there was a few actual hockey players who were in that film.
wow.
Which I thought was like, that's awesome. And
Wow.
the other cool thing from that is he said that Swayze was trying to get his song "She's Like the Wind" into that movie.
Well, well, I mean, that would have been sacrilege because it's in the correct movie.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like, that just blew me away. Like, what? So he recorded that, years before? He's just sitting on that waiting for the opportunity to sort of like get this released.
I heard it on the radio 2 weeks ago, and I was like, yeah, no, Swayze could sing. So, well, but before we leave the list, can I bring up just one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
So between 12 and 18, apologies to Keith Kachuk, J.C. Tremblay, and Rick Martin, and also number 11, Clark Provost. You have 4 goalkeepers. You have Mike Richter, Mike Vernon, Tom Barrasso, and Curtis Joseph.
Yeah, they all seem to be blending together.
Are serious contenders for the Hall.
Yep.
If you could choose between those 4, who is Richter your first? No, he's first on the list, but is that the guy you would put in first?
Yeah, my 4 is, I know everyone's super high on Cujo. I'm personally not. He's number 4 out of those 4 for me, so I go. For me, it's Richter by a wide margin over Barrasso, and then Vernon third. Then Vernon third, slightly over Cujo.
Okay.
Personally,
I'm okay with those rankings. Yeah, I think Richter was incredibly responsible for the only Stanley Cup ever won, the 1994 Rangers.
Well, that in the World Cup of Hockey in '96.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, no, Richter. I think I have mine in the same order as you do. So anyway, all right. So are we moving on to something else?
Yeah. So something came up today that really caught my eye, and I think you and I are both on the same page on this. The Philadelphia Phillies are going to be retiring the number of Dick Allen, and why this is really important. The Phillies have never, in their long history, ever retired the number of anyone who was not in the Hall of Fame. Potentially, Allen could be selected this year from the was it the Golden Age Committee? Doesn't matter which
whatever the name of it is, but yes.
But his era's rotation is coming up. So is this a push by the Phillies to get him in? Possibly, because you and I have talked many times that if an organization doesn't honor you, it sort of subconsciously reflects on the other people in different decision-making capacities, I would think.
Yeah, right. I mean, we talked about that when the Patriots fans elected Richard Seymour this year. That his chances to, like, we had to elect him, despite the fact, that all the writers want us to elect ourselves. But we had to elect him because he was probably being hurt on getting into the actual Hall of Fame by the fact he had gotten the Patriots Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
And I feel the same way about Dick Allen. I'll be honest, growing up without really knowing much, just based on his name, I thought Dick Allen was a white guy. And Bill Simmons used to have the Reggie Cleveland All-Stars, who are white guys who sounded like they were not white. Dick Allen would be, whatever the opposite of that is where Dick Allen would be for me on that list.
Well, I've got a similar one here for you, too. Remember a few weeks ago we were talking about Grant Fuhr, with black players in the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
I had no idea he was black, even though I saw him for years.
Well, he had that mask on, so it's honestly a little bit more difficult to tell.
Not just that, though. I mean, if you looked at Grant Fuhr...
Yeah.
You know when I found out he was black was when he was having trouble playing golf in a course in Buffalo or something, and he cried it was racism, and I was really confused. I mean, Grant Fuhr, sounds like a German guy. He also had sort of like the white guy mustache.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the same conversation with my Jamaican friend, and he said he had no idea that he was black until he actually met him at some party in Oakville, and he had a bunch of Polaroids that he shouldn't have had. And I'll leave it at that. Let's move on.
Okay, yeah. So back to Dick Allen.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, good on the Phillies for doing this. I understand what their rules were. The Red Sox had really strict rules for retiring numbers too, until they were just like, this is silly. Like they broke it with Johnny Pesky. Well, actually, it's more with when they had Jackie Robinson come through. Then they're like, well, we've already retired a number. If someone didn't play here, maybe we should be looking at retiring other numbers. And they retired Pesky, who's still not in the Hall of Fame, but was with the team for, God, I don't know, almost 70 years. But it's good when teams do this for people who deserve it. And Dick Allen is still to this day second in slugging percentage in Phillies history.
Which,
like, he was, back in the dead ball era.
I was going to say that. I mean, it's not just, if you look at his accumulative statistics, it may not stand out, but when you're looking what he did year by year in comparison. Mm-hmm. Which is sort of like why seasonal ranks mean so much, or OPS plus, mm-hmm. and other stats. Allen was one of the best power hitters and contact hitters of his day in an era that it wasn't what it was 15 years after, but you don't look at what they do compared to what players are doing 20 years after. You look at what they did in their bubble.
Right. Of course. I mean, that's what you have to do. But a lot of people don't. But you absolutely have to. And honestly, my guy who I thought was the best player not in from all these committees gotten a couple years ago, which was Ted Simmons, who I still, statistically and looking at everything, was no worse than like the worst best catcher of all time. Like, he was a glaring omission in the Hall. Looking at it now, I mean, Dick Allen is as close, I think, as for a position player, as a glaring omission to the Hall as any. And again, Harold Baines is a new floor, right? And with Harold Baines as the floor, there's a lot more people who would be eligible to get in. But the fact that Baines is in and Dick Allen isn't, it's not even a comparison between those two players.
No, that's completely true. Absolutely. I'm hoping that Allen gets in. If he doesn't, the Phillies still made the right call.
Agreed, 100%. 100% made the right call.
Okay, so I guess moving from that, I got no clever segue, so I'm just going to go right to it. No, thank you for sending me this, because I was off in Daytime Hockey World because I forgot to write about, because I didn't even know what happened. The Country Music Hall of Fame announced their class. Small classes, but I mean, they've been around forever, so they can do that.
Yeah. And by the way, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. That Hall of Fame is really cool, even for somebody who doesn't really follow country music that much. That is, if you're in Nashville, there's a lot to do in Nashville. Nashville is one of my favorite cities in the U.S., but if you are there, the Country Hall is definitely worth a stop.
Yeah, I definitely have to check that out. So the two big names, Hank Williams Jr., Marty Stewart, and I'm blanking on the third name. I should have had that ready.
Dean Dillon.
Dean Dillon, yeah, who wrote a lot of the hits for George Strait.
He only wrote 69 songs for George Strait, over 40 of which charted. So other than that, he didn't do much.
Yeah, exactly. One thing actually I noticed that I really kind of thought was a pretty cool idea. I don't know how long they've been doing it. So Dillon gets in as the songwriter, and then they rotate, almost like the baseball committees. So you've got a songwriter this year. Next year, it'll be a contributor.
A non-performer, I think.
Yeah, non-performer.
Yeah, I think it's non-performer next, yeah.
And then following that, it's going to be sort of like a on-the-road performer, I think is how they classify that.
Yeah, a touring musician.
Touring musician. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's it's a pretty good way to do that.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty cool too. And I mean, they have small classes anyway. Williams got in as the Veterans Era artist, and Stewart is the modern era artist. So they have different categories. They take one from each. With how many people they already have. I mean, Williams' dad, Hank Williams Sr., was inducted in the Country Hall almost 60 years ago now.
I know,
which shows you how long the hall's been around. I mean, significantly longer than the Rock Hall. The Rock Hall started in '86, I believe, was the first class. So, I mean, they've been around a long time. They've done a good job inducting who they should induct. You go there and you're like, I don't know who this person is, and you're like, oh, I understand why they're here. But yeah, I like the idea. Like, we have three categories. We have a senior getting in, we have a modern person getting in, and then we have other people rotating around once every 3 years. I'm going to be honest, I didn't realize up until I saw this that's how they did it, because I did a little digging afterwards. That's a very good way to run a Hall of Fame, that you've got all the real important people in, and you're not putting too many people in every year. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and you really don't need to. So, like, the bar is still actually very, very high. I mean, look at these three. Like, what more do you need?
Yeah. Well, Marty Stewart never went to number one, which you and I agree is almost impossible in country music.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it wasn't that he wasn't successful and on the charts all the time. He was, and I'm not a country music guy either, but I'm certainly very familiar with him and his flowing head of hair. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I hope that's all real.
Before he came in, he's definitely the inspiration for Lionel for the Thundercats.
And I love it. God, I hope that's all real. I really do. I think so.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know anyone who would make a wig like that, so I'd like to think it is as well.
Oh, God. Phil Spector?
Ugh. I have to wash my ears out with soap after hearing his name.
I'll always have a love-hate thing. Phil, such a genius, but my God.
Yeah. There's a lot of those out there, really.
Yes, there is. We could start a show on that right now and not be done until December. But yeah, do you think, here's what I wanted to ask you about Hank Williams Jr. with that. Talking about like woke calls and whatnot. I mean, he got himself in a bit of trouble. Even kicked off Monday Night Football. Do you think that's why this was delayed? Because he's a massive name, and it almost surprised me that he wasn't in already.
Yeah, it was surprising he wasn't in already to me as well. I mean, I'm sure that has something to do with it. He also had, if you're going to have a hall, you want to make sure the person up there is lucid and not going to puke on stage. And
that's true.
That might have been an issue for Hank for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, you and I both were shocked. I think we both think it's overdue for him getting in. But yeah, I mean, it very well may have had something to do with it. Although if there's a hall which seems less likely to care about people being woke, it's probably the Country Hall.
I think that's sort of changing now with the current climate, because what is it? It's the Chicks and Lady A, I believe.
Yes. But the Dixie Cups are still going by the Dixie Cups. So
are they still touring? Like some version of that?
I don't know. They are mostly. Well, yeah. I don't know. I did think it was funny that Dixie Cups did not change their name. So.
Yeah, because I know that once you're crossing a certain border, it's now just the Mason line.
Yeah,
they're not all gems, Evan. They're not all gems.
And the Dixie Cups are African American, so
maybe they named it after those little paper cups.
They could have. I mean, you got to have some inspiration to come up with Ika Waiko. So.
Oh, that is a guilty pleasure song. The Bell Stars version. But
going to the chapel and we're gonna get. Anyway, sorry.
How many chick flicks has that been in?
All of them.
Yes, definitely. Whenever there's a song that comes on the radio that I think, or just in general, my wife starts singing like, "How do you know that?" And then she'll rattle off some chick flick it was in. Every time.
Yeah.
But no, I'm certainly happy with this class. I can't imagine that there's any pushback from anybody in the country music world on this.
No. No, all three of those people are very deserving. So 100%.
Mm-hmm. So from there, I think we've got a few passings that we want to touch on. Or is there something we want to get on before that? I think those were the big three.
No, why don't we go? I know you have a lot to say about Kamala.
Yeah, Kamala, the Ugandan headhunter. So again, I'm a pretty big wrestling guy, not as much as I used to be, but I've had the privilege of actually talking to him twice. One actually this year, just 3 months ago, or three or 4 months ago, and you've seen him wrestle, I presume.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, to me, he was like one of the best monster characters that ever existed. It was one of those things that you just wanted to believe, even though, that made absolutely no sense. Like, how the hell did this guy who can't speak English get himself from arena to arena?
Mm-hmm.
And he pretty much only wore a loincloth. And it wasn't that he just didn't speak English. He didn't seem to speak any language. In the interviews, he would do this. That's what he would do. That was a Kamala promo. But I don't say stumbled across something that was sort of gold for him, because it really wasn't gold in terms of his pocketbook. Because he started wrestling at 28. Jerry the King Lawler came up with the Kamala gimmick for him. 4 years later, in 1982, was when he had that. And it was just from the way Lawler always told it, he got the idea from Idi Amin, a dictator in Uganda. And apparently there was a story about how some people there were into cannibalism. So he just ran with that, came up with this gimmick. And Kamala, was James Harris of Mississippi, wasn't a very good technical wrestler. In fact, he pretty much sucked, putting it bluntly. But for this gimmick, he didn't have to. Just did a bunch of chops. Didn't have to sell moves. Just was out there to terrorize people. It was one of those things where, okay, even back then when they didn't acknowledge that wrestling was predetermined or fake, whatever word you want to use, he did it so well, you just wanted to believe it.
Right.
And unfortunately, he grew up poor in rural Mississippi, and that's the way he died. He didn't make a lot of money. He was one of those guys I've seen in other interviews where he talked about how, like a lot of other wrestlers, would blow all their money, and a lot of them did, mostly through drugs, just in bad spending and not saving, mostly. Kamala always said that he never made a lot of money, and he was such a nice, kind guy. He probably didn't know how to negotiate or ask for it. I don't know that he ever understood his worth, because he sold out arenas all across the United States. Many headline shows with Hogan, with Hulk Hogan and New York City, like all across. I mean, like that was one of the biggest gates in 1987 after Hogan and Andre. It was Hogan and Kamala. People paid a lot of money to see that. Now, a lot of that, according to Kamala, and I believe him, it didn't really translate into his pocket. And he died really without anything. Died without legs. I don't know if you know that. Diabetes took his legs.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so he's pretty much been in a wheelchair for, I want to say 6 years. I could be wrong on that. But just real nice guy. No one's, that I've ever read it, had anything ever bad to say about him. And he'll be missed.
Yeah,
it's sort of sad the timing, right? Because he died the day before Kamala Harris got the nomination. It's a nomination,
right?
Or the vice president's nomination. So R.I.P. Kamala was trending, and there was a whole whack of political pundits just like freaking out for a bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that going, and then I expected not to go in politics that Harris was going to be the vice presidential candidate all along. I predicted that ever since Biden was the guy. But no, it was a little bit weird with the timing on everything.
Yeah, on what? Because he had a T-shirt that he was selling that it was Kamala 2020 in the first zero. It was his face in it.
Okay.
Which I thought that was pretty awesome. I hope he sold a lot of shirts, but probably not.
You never know.
Probably not. Probably not. So it's kind of a sad story just because he just a business. I don't know that he necessarily loved the business so much, but it sure as hell didn't treat him well.
Correct. Yeah, agree with that. So, good night to a giant in wrestling and in
literally
real life. So
the correct use of the use of the word literally too. So there we go, full circle.
Excellent. Well, it can't be full circle yet. We still have more stuff to talk about.
Yes.
So now I have four more people I want to bring up. One who I want to go into a little bit deeper. The first is Bill Yeoman. I believe that's how I pronounce his last name. He was an American college football player and coach who was a coach at University of Houston through 1986 and was the winningest coach. I think he still is in school history. And he was inducted to the College Football Hall of Fame back in 2001. So he passed at the age of 92 earlier this week. Do you have anything to say about Bill Yeoman, or is that just not a name that resonates in any way?
I'm not that familiar with him, honestly.
Interestingly, though, he passed away from kidney failure and AIDS-related pneumonia.
Oh.
At 92, which is an interesting piece of information. I don't know exactly what that meant. But, yeah. So. Yeah, it was just an interesting thing I didn't know how to deal with it. A second person I want to bring up is we don't talk about producers and sound engineers here very much. But I do want to bring up Martin Birch, who passed away, who produced and engineered albums for Deep Purple, Fleetwood Mac, Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult, Whitesnake, or Rainbow, Iron Maiden, all sorts of people like that. Like if you just look at his discography, it's an incredible list of things that he was in charge of. He did Wishbone Ash, excuse me, Jeff Beck, Peter Green, the Faces, Skid Row, John Lee Hooker. Someone else we don't talk about anymore, Gary Moore, Canned Heat. Like he was all over the place doing stuff for everybody. And one of those people who's never going to be a Hall of Fame, but you know his fingers are all over stuff that you know and care about. So God bless him. He passed at the age of 71. But they didn't give a cause of death on this. But I know Geezer Butler and David Coverdale, among others, had like pretty big things to say about Martin Birch, who passed away. Another one I want to bring up, and I have to control myself on this one. Member of the 1960s NFL All-Decade team, 2-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler, had his career cut short due to injury, but is probably, if they ever end up putting assistant coaches in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, is on the short list of people who you would consider first. Howard Mudd, who was the offensive line coach for the Colts for years, the offensive line coach in Kansas City with Tony Dungy when he was there. One of the great offensive line coaches in history. Passed away in a motorcycle accident at the age of 78 yesterday. Actually, today's the 13th, right? Yeah, so it's yesterday. He had been in an accident 2 weeks prior. But he had 47 years in the league and was coach. He got one Super Bowl ring with the Colts and that one championship Manning won there. But yeah, a heck of a player, a heck of a coach. Also, and I have to say this without being offensive, known for taping the other team's practices, which nobody apparently cared about. But he was one of the people who is known for getting video on his opponents when he wasn't supposed to. That kind of got swept under the rug at one point.
Or stuck in the mud.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
But
Howard Mudd was an incredible coach, and again, one like he and Dante Scarnecchia, and who's the guy who coached the Hawks? I can't think of his name right now. But the three,
I can see him.
They all three of those guys were offensive line coaches, and that's all they did. And in the last 30 years, there was probably none better than the three of them.
Yes, sadly, we're probably not going to see assistant coaches ever get into the Hall of Fame. I don't see it ever happening. It could, but I doubt it.
They're having enough trouble putting seniors in. I can't imagine them. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I can't imagine getting it together. But the last person I want to talk about a little bit is Trini Lopez passed away, and that wasn't a name that necessarily that resonated with you. But Trini Lopez was a folk singer, Mexican-American folk singer, who is most known for his song from 1964, If I Had a Hammer, well, his cover version of that. It went gold. He also had another one called Lemon Tree, which I don't know. Have you ever read The Things They Carried? Did you ever read that book?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So in that book, Lemon Tree is like disturbingly important for that book. But yeah, he was a very, very long tenured, still fairly active performer. Had 50, almost 60-year career. Passed over this week of COVID, actually. He's also, for those who love old movies, he's also one of the few remaining members of the Dirty Dozen who's still alive. He played Jimenez, who's the guitar player in the group, and also was the one who, spoiler alert, the movie came out in 1967, so he's only had 53 years. Or what was I saying, 63 years at this point. No, 53, sorry. But he was the one who didn't actually get to make the mission because his parachute got stuck in the tree. It was just an important figure in the early 60s folk music era, which is, folk music's heyday. But it's sad to see him go because he's still been performing. I think I saw him performing on something not even that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 years. I was like, oh, it's great to see that he's out and still doing stuff. I think he may have been on Telemundo because I sometimes watch soccer games in Spanish. But yeah, I know he passed at 83 earlier this week.
Yeah, so that's COVID that took two, actually, because that's what Kamala passed away of, was COVID.
Yeah, COVID, and he also had diabetes and other things that made it much harder.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so he was certainly compromised and had been for a long time, but yeah, once you're in that state and you catch the super flu, and I still can't believe there are people denying that out there. But
I have two people, like I said, I have two people who are probably dying over the weekend who I have sat down across the table from a dozen times.
Yeah. That's for a political show that maybe you and I should start doing. I don't know. I get too worked up. Maybe not.
Yeah, no, I value my job and friendships too much to get myself involved in a political program.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. So,
so anyway, so that's all I have for this week in terms of passings. But what are we talking about next week?
Next week, if nothing sort of comes up, I think we should sort of start hammering out just what we're going to do with the U.S. Hall of Fame that we've been talking about, and just get right to that.
We should. Here's a question. Do you think they're actually going to come out with nominees for the Rock Hall?
I don't know. That's sort of a good question. I've been asked that too. You've probably asked that too, I think.
I don't know either. But because that's something that usually comes out in sometime between mid-September and mid-October. It's been a little bit later over the last few years, but it used to be like September 15th. Now it's been like the first week of October. Because that's not something we necessarily should do next week. I'm just saying it's something that's coming up that we should think about in the future. But no, the U.S. Hall of Fame makes a lot of sense in making sure. So how many people, just a reminder, how many people do we want on the committee?
Maximum 16, minimum 8.
Okay, fair enough. I will double down my efforts to get a hold of people who I haven't necessarily been getting a hold of.
I've got
See if anyone thinks.
Well, because if we've got a Hall of Famer in the Mascot Hall of Fame, I'll secure the Dolphins Ring of Honor guy. And how about someone who's in the Fan Hall of Fame?
That would be fine. A fan Hall of Famer would work for me.
Okay, because I've got someone who could probably do that. But yeah, we'll get to work on that.
I'll reach out to a couple of people I know again, and if they're not interested, see if they know anyone who might be interested, who would be worthy of getting in here. So, cool. I will work on it. We'll work on it. We'll get everything organized and together, and go from there.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
All right, later, man.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, everyone, and look for new content on the regular at notinhalloffame.com.